What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of NF Twins. Today, we're talking about our favorite topic, AI agents. You've heard it all. We're going to repeat it again. What? We want to specifically talk about Gemini 2.0 Flash. And Gemini has fucking some incredible changes compared to the failure there was in the first one. Because Gemini 1, boy, oh boy, Lucas.
I mean, it wasn't even called Gemini 1, right? At the beginning it was called Bot because it was like so bad and that I had to change the name of it. But also, by the way, Merry Christmas, everybody. So we're actually recording this on the 24th of December. So yeah, Merry Christmas, of course.
Well, for those Europeans, for those Americans, well, you have to wait till tomorrow morning and then you can listen to it. And then Merry Christmas to you. Or
exactly.
Or happy holidays.
Exactly. So when we're looking back, for example, Bart was a big failure for Google. Then they introduced Gemini 1, and now they're introducing Gemini 2.0, and the changes are crazy. Like, for example, now we're going more and more into the agentic world. So agentic means with agents. Just to give you more explanation, what is that? What does it even mean, right? So, for example, agents could be, or agentic models could be, for example, for example, use Gemini 2.0. And then you say, give different tasks. For example, hey, I want to recreate this picture. So then you have one agent, so one model who does like analyze the pictures, then also sees like, okay, what colors are needed. The second one has access to a tool, which then accesses the internet. The internet, then it will do the shopping. So basically say, hey, I put all these colors that you require into your shopping cart so you can directly buy it. So that means agentic because you have different agents that coordinate together to do tasks. Now, this at the beginning might still require you. For example, of course, you don't want the model to actually purchase things, but they can coordinate. So this will get more and more complex and they will be able to do more and more cool things. Well, for example, in the example of Gemini 2.0, they even talked about AI, like introducing it to games. They were playing Clash of Clans, and then they had the AI as like, hey, I'm playing right now because they have live streams. So basically, they can interact.
Oh, yeah, I want to talk about
with
this
content,
as well.
which is really crazy, right? So imagine normally you take a picture, then it's processing it, and then you get an answer. But now they have the option to do it live, meaning you, for example, the pixel, you would just take it and say, hey, what do you see there? Or screen recording, right? For example, if you take a game you're playing right now, it accesses it and says, hey, yeah, why not attack from the east? The defense looks pretty weak there. So it's really, really cool to see the implementation of it. Of course, at the beginning, it might not be as good, etc.
I actually want to talk about, so I want to talk about it a little bit. So Gemini or Google is actually working with Supercell, which is the producer, or actually the company that, producer, I guess, the gaming studio that has Clash of Clans. So they're working together with them to see how far these agents or AI can work, understanding the rules, etc., making recommendations. So in their product video that they released with Gemini 2.0, they also were going like, hey, first I want to do a raid and then I want to have a battle afterwards, I think. And these are my cards currently. What should I do? Who should I put in? And then it explains like, oh, you should put in the barbarians to tank, I think it says, and you should put this and this in there for this and this purpose. So it's super cool because it understands the game and then explains it even for someone who may not be a professional yet or is just getting there, why it makes these choices. It's super, super cool. And I think this will give for some people who play with this kind of a cheat code, man. Don't you think, Lucas? Like, think about use AI and then you can win because you're setting up the perfect.
Well, some call it cheat code, but for me, I'm thinking more about Iron Man. You have just like Jarvis. You just have Jarvis there. It's like, man, that is so.
But
cool.
in a video game.
Yeah, okay, in a video game. But to be honest, what's the difference? Let's like, for example, in World of Warcraft. Let's like assume World of Warcraft. You have there already the helpers, right? So there are add-ons, etc., which already guide you basically through the entire game. So you technically don't have to discover anything anymore because you directly know where to go, etc. So this is like a very dumb version of it. It's just like a smarter version. And if everybody's using it, then it cancels out. For example, if they have these collaborations, everybody might use it. AI for this, etc. And this is,
well, first of all, not everyone is going to use it. That's just not realistic because not everyone is going to use AI always, Lucas. No. Even then,
if you're competitive, for sure.
Yeah, I'm saying, but not everyone will use it for sure.
Also, my question is how smart will it be, right? In-game
Honestly, it looked pretty good.
situations.
So I think it will get only better because think about it, AI has made massive progress already, and if they have direct integration with these kind of games, or at least just understand based on context how these systems work or how these games work,
Yeah.
it can be super powerful. Because think about it, like imagine now you connect to a direct API, and you know who you're playing against. For
Yeah.
example, League of Legends. If you have that information, it can give you much uh, let's put this way: League of Legends. Okay, you have the API. You know exactly you're going to play against. I'm going to play against you, so I know who you're playing. You're going to play. I can
Yeah.
ban against first of all who you most likely will play. I mean, this is already one thing, but this will do it
Which you already
automatically.
have,
Second of all,
technically. Which you
which
already
this is
have.
already have. All right, this is nothing new, but you can then already have jungle paths, all these stuff. What you usually do, you can have all this stuff in there too, because all this information is on the API, the Riot API. Not where you're tracking, but when do you kill which monster, when do you usually kill your first kill, where was that first kill, etc. That's wild.
Makes
I'm just
sense.
saying. So think about it. Then you have an AI in-game assistant, which is, don't get me wrong, crazy complex, very, very complicated. But with that, you can have fucking crazy advantages that will definitely make a difference between silver and, because now you have in-game sense. The AI assistant in-game can tell you like, oh no, you should be overextending. Someone is missing. Because it can see it live. You can live stream the video even and directly tell you like, oh, okay, careful, this guy's missing in the bot lane or the mid lane. Just move back. That's fucking insane. That's super cool.
That reminds me well, gaming is one thing which I think is really fantastic, but I want to go back to actually when they introduced Gemini 2.0, because in general they introduced 4 like projects like agents which are kind of interesting. So the first one is the Astra. So Astra is the one for the where we meant, for example, in real life, you're using it. So you have like directly, hey, what is this? This is the painting, the Mona Lisa, drawn by XYZ, etc. Then you have the Marina, which was the one is like, hey, I'm looking at the picture, I want to recreate it. Please, that's when there are multiple agents coordinate. So you can say, hey, I want to recreate it. Please go to create a shopping list, etc., which is really, really cool. Then, of course, there are agents for developers. So because you're a developer, so you want to build something, right? You can use right now Copilot. Like Copilot, actually not that great. You can use other ones which are better. But then this one is the new one. It's called Jules, Agent for Developers. Then Mark mentioned already agents for in-games, which I think is fascinating, especially for like the more complex games, strategy games. Not sure about shooters, to be honest. Shooters might not be the thing, but what I think I'm seeing more now is they're putting more and more in like saying we're building with responsibility, because like you've seen, I've listened to another day to a podcast from the founder of Anthropic, and he's talking about the dangers of AI. So he's not that he's gonna be like saying, hey, AI is bad or anything. It's just like right now, AI might not be a threat because they haven't reached certain intelligence levels. But if certain criteria are not met, well, on like safety measures are not done, that will cause, of course, like for example, I think they has like 4 levels. Level 2 is still they can't learn by can learn by themselves, but they can't like procreate, etc. And then you need to have certain sandboxes. So sandbox basically like, hey, they can't escape. And then he's like arguing about it. Why? So you only need a sandbox if the model is bad, right? If the model is great, you never need a sandbox or something to contain it in. Because if it's a good model, it would never require certain sandbox or a way to make sure that it doesn't escape, right? Because when it reaches,
but how do you ensure that it's a good model if it can?
Exactly. That's if you always have to consider like training data, making sure it ethical, the training, etc. All of that happens, because otherwise you're not. For example, that's one in some of these bigger companies, a few developers left because they didn't get the commuting power. Right, they were promised to have each because. Guys, for those who don't know not a lot about AI, how the training model, how it works with the training, it is you basically have a lot of computing hours, and the more computing hours, basically it learns better and better. Of course, you have tons or millions of training data points, but in theory, the more training hours you give it to it, the better it gets. And of course, those in the safety or policy department want to have certain amount of computing, so they can make sure that these models are also incorporating this part.
You know what is? I think that's actually a very, very deep question, or I think issue that humanity in general, because we're talking now about robots or AI, I don't know, artificial intelligence, following certain rules, but that even humans we can't even agree on, right? There's a whole thing, especially it's for example in the US, what the extreme on the left versus the extreme on the right, they can't even agree upon what is it, equity versus equality. What does that mean? Like, should everyone have the same amount of money, or should it be merit? Should you be hired based on diversity? Should you be hired because merit? Like I said, like all these kind of things, right? And I think this is because what one person sees as fair and right, the other person does not. So how do you teach that to a model? And then because it will have a bias eventually, well, it will at least feel like a bias for someone.
Wasn't there like a bias, like very strong bias at the beginning of Gemini, not Gemini, of
Well,
Bart, when they thought like
well, yeah. I
black
mean, it was just
Nazis?
exactly. So that's what I said. That was that was in the back coming back to the intro. Exactly. So because it was trained on like, hey, I don't know, all the wokeness, all the wokeness stuff, basically all the data you could create. Like, hey, you say would ask, hey, please create Nazis from 45. I don't know, whatever. Like, and they should be
Yeah,
historically accurate, and they were black. Someone who
that's
studied a
crazy.
little bit of history knows they were not black Nazis. They're white. As a German, we have heard the history and we've read about it. They're white. So yeah. So one of these things, or even like for like let's say the in the US, like, hey, please, right, like give us images of I don't know Indian tribes, the native tribes, and they were like other colors or like weird, like, or give us one of the pilgrims that went over there and they were like also like black, or the classic diversity thing, which was just not
For this,
accurate.
for this in general, what I think is very fascinating, also some things that are for our listeners to take home. Now with AI, we need more and more data. So labeling data becomes more and more important, because you have on the one side like all these data points, but none of them are well labeled. If they're not well labeled, the AI it's like having a bad teacher. If the teacher doesn't explain to you well, or like prepares to certain steps, you're not going to learn fast or as good as you could be. So if you're labeling the data correctly or very accurately, it makes it so much easier to train these data or these models. And that's why data labeling becomes more and more important. And in one point in time, what data you will use. So that's when also it's becoming more and more important that these models can create their own training data and then train on top of that one. So that's
Well,
like
or
something super
clean data,
fascinating.
like, right, like we
Yeah.
talked about last time, or I think we talked about a couple months ago already, or about that create synthetic data. I
Yeah,
know
that's
it's
what I just
synthetic
meant. They
data.
create
Yeah, yeah,
the
exactly.
model creating their own data or their
Yes and
training
no,
data.
because I'm not talking about that the model should do it first. I'm just saying that a different model or something
Yeah,
creates
but
it
that's what
and
that's the
then
same. It's like this some
okay.
other model, like an AI, creates synthetic data, and then a model will be trained on top of this, which just makes sense. Because there was a long argument about it, what it doesn't make sense, but in the end, of course,
You know,
it
actually,
could
Lucas, we should
be.
talk about it in another episode about synthetic data, how that works. Because even from me, I'm not 100% sure how that would work, right? How do we make sure that this is not just hallucination? You know what I
But
mean?
that's the thing.
Like,
That's what's the difference between human data and the other one? I don't think huge one, because how many like data points that the
no,
model
no,
is
but
taking
like it
from the
depends on the
internet.
topic. Like, look, you
Yeah,
need to
yeah,
give it
but
at least some. Hey, you need to have these are the physics that these are the physics the world is based on.
my point is a lot of these human data points it's trained upon, humans were just talking garbage, right? So may it be Twitter, Reddit, etc.
No,
And
no, but
these
I'm
where
talking
people are not
about more
right.
about the natural world, not like not text or anything, Lucas. I'm talking about like science kind of shit. You know what I mean?
Oh
Let's
yeah,
talk about next
actually,
episode,
but
Lucas. Let's talk about it next
we'll
episode.
talk about
That's
the
better.
next one. But just to finish up this topic and this episode, which is really, really interesting. Now, more and more of these models understand physics, right? So they understand the physical world, which makes it so interesting, because we also talked about in the previous episode about these world models. This means it gets more and more interesting for robots, right? Because they understand the physics around them, makes it for them easier to move, as well as getting them conscious, right? Because in the end, it was like, if you have a robot, AI, Tesla robot, etc., you want to have it, like, first of all, to not step on your foot and just fucking break your foot, or like a server, like a server at one point in time will be a robot, and of course that he can like maneuver through the crowd, and that will be done through these bigger models that are also then called world models, because they are also representing the physics or understand the physics of the surrounding world, which makes it easy for them to maneuver through the real world. I think that's a great end. And with this, Mark, Merry Christmas. And of course, please leave a comment below what do you want to hear next. And of course, catch you next one. Peace.
Merry Christmas. Ciao.